Okay, so it's time for us to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to jump back into some more Wolverine comics. Now, in the early 1990s, when it came to Marvel Comics, they were really trying their best to give us the origin of Wolverine, but giving us different pieces and different story arcs over time. Now, the person in charge of giving us the origin of Wolverine in the early 1990s was Larry Hama. And to me, Larry Hama did an amazing job. Now, today we're going to cover a three-part story arc that takes place in issue number 66, 67, and 68. Now, this three-part story arc is really interesting to me. And the reason why, because you have Wolverine thinking that he's back in 1968. Let me explain. As we dive into Wolverine issue number 66, we do pick up Wolverine in Canada. Now, for right now, Wolverine believes it's 1968. And so when he walks up to this building called the Prophecy, he realized that a lot of things has changed in the last year since he has been there. Now, here's the thing. He believes the last time he was there was 1967. And now his mind is 1968. But in reality, it's 1993. And so, of course, a lot of things had changed in a long time. But for Wolverine, his mind is so messed up right now, he believes it's 1968. And so when he walks into the actual building, this place has new rules. No smoking, no drinking, no drugs. All these different rules they did not have back in 1968. Now for Wolverine, he ignores all those rules and begins to walk upstairs. And he tells the front desk person like, hey, I'm going to room 23. Now the front desk person is very confused because they don't have a room 23. But you didn't have somebody else say like, no, we used to back in the day. And so it tells us that Wolverine's mind is in the past right now in 1968, but really he's in 1993. And the question is right now, why is his mind like that? And we get the answer to our question very quickly because we jump over to the X-Mansion where we pick up with some members of the X-Men like Charles Xavier, Jean Grey, Colossus, Cyclops, and Jubilee. And they walk into Wolverine's room and his room is completely wrecked. And the question is right now, why? And so then you have Charles say, I think I know why his room is like this. It's because of me. I did something to his mind. But before we are able to learn what Charles Xavier did to Wolverine's mind, we jump back over to Wolverine. Now you have Wolverine having a conversation with somebody else in the bar. And they're asking Wolverine, hey, why'd you come back over here? Now for Wolverine, he tells a guy and us the readers that some kind of angel was whispering in his ear, telling him to come back over here. Now he asks the guy for a crowbar, and then out of nowhere, the guy turns into a puppet, but does hand Wolverine a crowbar. Now this shows that Wolverine's mind is on some kind of trip, but either way, he begins to hit the crowbar into the actual floor in this room. Now, you then have Wolverine tell us more about how he arrived here at this location. You see, while Wolverine was at that center, he was playing pinball, but then he realized there was something wrong about the actual pinball. The idea of the pinball looked like him. And then out of nowhere, he began to hallucinate all these different kinds of images all at once. But once he was able to come back to, well, we see the pinball machine was completely destroyed thanks to Wolverine. But then at the very end of that section, we see a small little angel who tells Wolverine, hey, you need to handle the Terry Adams problem. Now, that is the name we heard in our earlier videos when it came to Wolverine, but we had no idea who Terry Adams was. And really, we are going to learn here in this story arc. But now we have to jump back over to Charles Xavier, where we do learn what he actually did to Wolverine. And so you have Charles informing us, but also the X-Men, what he did to Wolverine. He tells us that Wolverine came to him asking for a favor. And apparently Wolverine has never asked Charles for any kind of favor at all. But either way, you do have Charles tell us that Wolverine wanted Charles to go into his mind, kind of make things easier for Logan to remember certain things in his life. Now, the problem is that for Logan, he has gone through so many things over the years of his life. especially the idea that his mind has been messed with by Weapon X in so many different ways. And so for Charles, it's kind of like, listen, I can go into your mind, but the thing is, I cannot really help clear your mind out because I don't know what you need to actually remember and things you need to forget. That's the problem with your mind. We have no idea which memories are actually real and which ones are actually fake. But now we have to jump back over to Wolverine. You see, when it comes to Wolverine, he's having a hard time actually remembering what was the whole idea of Terry Adams. And so you didn't have the Angel tell Wolverine that she'll help him remember everything about Terry Adams. But then she tells him to look down because let's not forget, the man had a crowbar earlier and he used that crowbar on the floor panels in this room. Now, before we are able to see what he had hidden in his room many years ago, he is then confronted by a dead body. Now, this dead body is, of course, another hallucination. But this dead body is actually Janice Hollenbach. Now, we have learned about this character in the past because she used to work very close to Logan when it came to a mission against Omega Red in his past. Now, really, she's not that important for today's video. It's just him seeing her dead body in his mind. Either way, we do learn what he had kept in his room many years ago. All these different kinds of weapons, all these different kinds of money, but also all these different fake IDs that he can use around the world. IDs for like the KGB, the CIA, and the list goes on and on. Heck, even the FBI. Now, getting back over to Charles Xavier, he continues to explain to us more what he did to Wolverine's mind. Now, he tells us that when he had to enter the mind of Wolverine, it was a hot mess because Wolverine's mind is so messed up, it was kind of like walking into an actual nightmare. But you have Wolverine kind of asking Charles to help him remember the whole idea of Terry Adams. So once you have Logan kind of give Charles that request, Charles was able to push everything to the side to make sure that Wolverine could remember about Terry Adams. The problem is that Wolverine's mind went back in time to 1968. And that's the only way he'll be able to remember about Terry Adams. But then we see Storm go ahead and meet up with John Wraith. Now remember, John Wraith was also part of Team X alongside with Wolverine, Sabretooth, Maverick, and Silver Fox. Now, we do learn that apparently for John Wraith, he has no idea what was the Terry Adams mission all about. It was so ultra hush-hush, only 3 people actually knew about it. Wolverine, Sabretooth, who was the backup for the mission, and then finally, well, Maverick, who's kind of like the Overwatch for the entire mission. But for John, he tells Storm, I cannot help you at all when it comes to figuring out what was the Terry Adams mission all about. Now, when we jump over to Jubilee and also Jean Grey, we do learn that where Wolverine's heading off to. And apparently the man is heading over to Russia. And so somewhere in Russia is where the Terry Adams mission is actually at. But then we get back over to Wolverine, who's on his way over to Russia. Now, here comes the big problem, though. You see, for Wolverine, he is still continuing to have a conversation with his small angel on his shoulder. And his small angel on his shoulder is telling him that he has to make things right when it comes to the Terry Adams mission. The whole idea that he has to kill off Terry Adams. Now, on the bus on his way over to the area where his mission is going to be at, the bus is actually stopped by some Russian soldiers. Now, here's the thing. Wolverine's mind is still in 1968, and right now it's 1993. The Soviet Union is no longer around. And so for Wolverine, he believes that his ID, his fake ID that says that he's KGB, will give him a pass with these soldiers. Except when these soldiers look at his badge, they're kind of like, yeah, nah, there's no way you're KGB because they're gone now in the present day. And so they shoot down Wolverine and they take all his clothes, but they leave behind his Wolverine outfit. And so as we dive into Wolverine issue number 67, we do pick up with Logan still laying there on the ground, and his healing factor is trying to help him actually recover. Now, we see Wolverine being eaten up by some jackals, but once his healing factor fully kicks in and being able to properly heal him, he's able to get up and kill off the jackals who were eating him alive. Now, he does find his Wolverine outfit, but because mine's in 1968, he does not recognize the outfit at all. For some strange reason, though, he feels like he actually knows about the outfit. But again, because mine's in 1968, he's kind of like, this outfit seems weird, but at the same time seems somewhat familiar. But either way, he does continue on to head to the location of where his mission is actually at. And he continues to talk to that angel. But now we have to jump over to Charles Xavier. Now, when we do, we see that Charles Xavier feels bad for what he has done to Wolverine. He feels like he's at fault for Wolverine now being out there trying to kill somebody known as Terry Adams. For Charles Xavier, it's kind of like, I should have not messed with his mind at all. If I did not mess with his mind at all, then most likely he would not try to go out there to kill somebody known as Terry. Now, that is the moment you have Colossus inform Charles that the X-Men were able to locate Maverick, and they're hoping to use Maverick to hopefully find Wolverine. And so you have the X-Men go over to where Maverick could possibly be at. Now, when they do first arrive at that location, they find a young woman who seems to be, well, dead, but also floating in midair. Now, this young woman, she is a mutant, but she is also dead. Now, for our heroes, they believe at first that it was Maverick who had killed her off. But you have Maverick say, no, it was not me. It was somebody else. Unfortunately, they got away. Now, that is when you have the X-Men ask Maverick about the Terry Adams mission. Now, for Larry Hama, it seems that he's also trying to explain how the healing factor of Wolverine actually works, because we see Wolverine just walking across the desert, but unfortunately he is slowly dying off because his healing factor, it needs fluids and also food to feed off of to properly heal up Wolverine. And so you had a small angel tell Wolverine that, but also tell Logan like, hey man, listen, I know you're trying to complete this mission, but you have like another 100 miles before you are able to get to Terry Adams to actually kill him off. Now we have to jump over to those guys who shot up Wolverine earlier. And the reason why, because they're going around their town celebrating the idea of what they did to Wolverine. But then you have somebody inform them that, hey, listen, there was a bounty on the head of Wolverine, apparently for 100 yen. Or 100 million yen. Either way, there is a lot of money out there on the head of Wolverine. And this bounty was put out there by the Hand. And so once you have the guys realize they had just supposedly killed off the man who has this big bounty on his head, they're kind of like, dude, we gotta go back, find that dead body so that we are able to collect the money from this bounty. Now, when we jump back over to Wolverine, we do see that Wolverine is eating vultures to kind of help his healing factor work a tad bit faster. But while you have Wolverine eating those vultures, we then see those guys who shot at Wolverine earlier go back to that bus and realize the body of Wolverine is no longer there. And so they begin to freak out. And their goal is to hopefully find him so they're able to collect on that bounty. Now, I want to jump back over to the X-Men and also, well, Maverick, because you have Maverick tell the X-Men that Terry Adams is not a who. Actually, it is a where. It's a space station in Russia that was part of the Soviet Union space program back in the day. And so for Maverick, he says, listen, if Wolverine's trying to finish that mission, that means most likely he's going to go there. Now, here comes the next big problem, though. You see, there is a minefield out there around that area. And when it came to the original mission back in 1968, that minefield was not part of Wolverine's briefing, which means that if Wolverine goes over there and walks through that minefield, then most likely he is going to get blown up. Now, the space station would have been closed down back in 1968, but it's not. It's still up and running in 1993. And the only reason why, because there are still satellites out there in the orbit of the Earth that have to be controlled by the space station back on Earth. But either way, for our heroes, their main concern right now is Wolverine, because it seems like his mission is to break into that space station. But right now, he has to walk through a field of mines, and most likely, he's going to get blown up. Now, for Wolverine, he was able to realize that yes, there is a minefield out there surrounding the actual space station. And so for Wolverine, his goal now is to figure out how to get around the actual minefield. But then out of nowhere, those guys from earlier who is trying to collect on the bounty of Wolverine appear with a tank. And their main goal is to, well, kill off Wolverine. The problem is that, well, they don't, because Wolverine is able to cut his way through their tank and kill them off just like that. Now, once you have Wolverine being able to get inside the actual space station, that is when he is confronted by a young blonde woman. Now, this young blonde woman, she is very confused of who Wolverine is because, one, he was in disguise, and two, the way he is talking is kind of like 1968 speech, not 1993. He is naming all these different organizations that are no longer around. Either way, you then have Wolverine force her to take him deeper into the space station. Now, when she does, that is when he takes off his disguise to show his Wolverine outfit. Now, for the young woman, she was warned many years ago by her mother about him because, again, he still thinks it's 1968, but it's 1993. And so apparently he was here in 1968. He tried to kill off the person he was supposed to kill off, but he failed. And so the young blonde woman says, you were here many years ago and you failed when it came to trying to kill off my father. And I'm hoping you'll fail again when it comes to my father. And so we then see her take Wolverine to this big door. And once the door opens up, that's when she tells Wolverine that her father is Epsilon Red, the Soviet super astronaut. And so as we dive into Wolverine issue number 68, we actually pick up with the first appearance of Epsilon Red. Now, Epsilon Red is one of those characters that Marvel made, but just never used ever again. I think he appeared 2 more times over in Maverick Comics, and that's really it. Besides that, you never saw the character ever again. It's kind of weird because Epsilon Red was part of the Soviet Union Super Soldier program, the same program that made Omega Red. Now, when it came to Epsilon Red, the main goal for him was to be used in the space race. As we all know, when it came to America and also the Soviet Union, their main goal was to put someone on the moon. Who would do it first? And so they had Epsilon Red. Epsilon Red had the ability to breathe out in space, which honestly would make him the most perfect astronaut to use in the space race. Now, back in 1968, Wolverine was sent there to kill him off. And so Wolverine right now is still thinking it's 1968. In the present day for Epsilon Red, he is very confused on why Wolverine's talking the way he is. Because these two guys, they met in 1968. And apparently these two had worked out a deal where Wolverine would not come back here and try to kill off Epsilon Red. But here he is again, trying to kill off Epsilon Red. But for Logan, it's kind of like, I never met you before. What in the world are you even talking about? So then you have Wolverine being able to get a flashback. Now with this flashback, it shows Wolverine that yes, you were there before. You were there in the past when you tried to kill off Epsilon Red. And that time, his wife was there as well. And you almost killed her off. And she was pregnant with that young blonde woman, the daughter of Epsilon Red. Either way, when it comes to Wolverine, this flashback really shows that yes, he was there because he remembered that Epsilon Red wanted to die because this man was kind of forced into the actual program. They had changed him into what they needed him to be. this perfect astronaut. Now, we also learned that Epsilon Red has some psychic abilities. And with those abilities, he is able to go into the mind of Wolverine to kind of help clear things up, to bring Wolverine back to the present day. Now, we also get a page where we see the X-Men on their way over to Russia to hopefully find Wolverine just in time. So we have like Iceman, Cyclops, Jubilee, Psylocke, and Colossus on their way to hopefully save Wolverine just in time. Now, I want to jump back over to Wolverine and Epsilon Red because you have Epsilon Red technically tell us that it is going to be really hard to fix the mind of Wolverine. Really, we have been hearing that so many times by different ways, but this time is Epsilon Red saying, because your mind has been messed with so many times, it's really hard to undo all the work that those people did to your mind. And also, you yourself had put blocks in your mind that I cannot remove either. But what I can do right now is slowly help you and bring you back to the present day. And so we do see that you have Epsilon Red play a flashback in the mind of Wolverine when he first arrived here back in 1968, where he was trying to kill off Epsilon Red. That apparently right where you had Wolverine about to kill off Epsilon Red, you had Sabretooth arrive. Now remember, earlier Maverick told us that Sabretooth, part of Team X, was the backup for Wolverine. And apparently Sabretooth told Wolverine, hey, the mission is canceled. We got to call back. Let's go right now. Spare the man's life. And so just like that, Wolverine did not kill off Epsilon Red because Sabretooth told him so. Now, for Epsilon Red, he still wants to continue to help bring Wolverine back to the present day. And so it's like, hey, I need to go into your mind to actually help you. And so you have Epsilon Red go into the mind of Wolverine and begin to do work on Wolverine's mind. Now, Epsilon Red, he told Wolverine, this is going to be a hard process. And for Wolverine, it was, because he had to relive a lot of moments in his life that had caused him a lot of pain. By the end of this section, though, Wolverine is back to normal. His mind is back to normal. But then you have Epsilon Red say, hey, I need to ask you a favor. I need you to help me get home. But then we see a bunch of guards just bust into the room. Now, their main goal is to make sure that Wolverine and also Epsilon Red cannot actually leave. But you have Wolverine being able to take down the guards, and then you have Epsilon Red tell Wolverine where home is for him. And apparently home for him is up in space. He wants to finally use his abilities that was given to him to go to space. And so you have Wolverine being able to sneak Epsilon Red on a rocket that's at a space station right now that was actually heading towards space. And so Epsilon Red does get the ability to go to space. And then Wolverine is picked up by the X-Men and they head back home. Now, the ending of this book is really important. Here's the reason why. Because we jump back over to the young blonde girl we saw earlier, the daughter of Epsilon Red. And we learn that her name is Alina Ivanova. Now, Alina is going to be really important in later chapters down the road when it comes to Wolverine comics. But for Alina, we learn that she's actually a psychic, that she was the one who went into the mind of Wolverine. And here's the reason why: to find Sabretooth. And let me explain. You see, for Alina, she learned that her mother died while giving birth to her. And that's technically true, but not technically true. Let me explain. You see, we go back to 1968. And remember, Wolverine was sent to kill off Epsilon Red. But then Sabretooth said, hey, we have to abort the mission. And so Wolverine did not kill off Epsilon Red and left. But Sabretooth, he stayed behind. Epsilon Red wanted to die because what they had turned him into, except for Sabretooth is all like, hey, my boss said I can't kill you, but you know what? I know how to make you feel really sad when it comes to your life. And so you have Sabretooth kill off Epsilon Red's wife, the mother to Alina. And so right after he did that, they had to give birth to Alina right then and there. And so the reason why she went into the mind of Wolverine is to find Sabretooth, to get revenge against the man who had killed off her mother. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.